Well, Nick, let's talk about the wildfires.
Yeah.
So you characterize, how did you, the Western wildfires or how did you call wildlife fires? How do you
Yeah, so
differentiate?
we call them, we refer to them in our fire department as wildland fires. A lot of the catchphrase right now is WUI, WUI, like wildland urban interface.
Yeah.
And across the American West, and I don't mean to say that these don't take place in the East as well, but I think such a of catastrophic fires in the world now for a number of reasons, but due largely just to our climate and the fact that really the Western United States, for lack of a better description, is a bit of a desert, and
Yeah.
it can be high desert, kind of up towards the Rockies, or low desert here, and it doesn't seem like it because we're so close to the ocean, but
Yeah.
we're truly a desert climate, and the combination of a lot of different factors have created fire conditions in the American West over the past, I would say specifically 4 to 5 years, that have been sort of unprecedented, and I think like none that we've ever seen before.
I had an experience in Colorado this summer, Nick. So I like to hike when I'm in Colorado, and I'm normally in like the Beaver Creek, Vail Valley area, and I kind of hike up to the top of the different mountains up there. And I got to tell you, Nick, it was as dry as I have seen it in 15 years. I mean, I felt like a spark would set the entire mountain off. And matter of fact, there were a number of fires in Colorado when I was up there, including a big fire in Grand Junction that was caused by an 18-wheeler driver just throwing a cigarette butt out the window when he's driving down the road. There was another fire that was probably less than 10 miles from the Beaver Creek area, which has a ton of very expensive houses. It's an big economic deal for the entire state of Colorado. And so I got to see firsthand 5 or 6 helicopters and planes flying over this. It was a small fire, but you could tell they were just that they knew that if this fire jumped across the highway, jumped across I-70, it was going to be a economic disaster. And so they were all over this. But the thing that really struck me, Nick, the most, like you're talking about, was I just could not believe how dry it was. I mean, there's dry, and then there's like bone dry, and it was bone dry in Colorado this summer. So is that kind of like it is out west where you are?
It is, and we talk about fuel moisture levels, and they just continue to dry. And obviously, when it rains or snows, that fuel moisture level increases. But then when it just gets dried out like that, I mean, we haven't had measurable rainfall, I would say probably since April, maybe, and that's not uncharacteristic for where I live and for a lot of the regions out here. And so you combine that with, and I know I might raise a few hackles, but with, global warming, forest management over the past generations, and combine it with, just a climate cycle that seems to be trending towards more warm.
Yeah.
And it's producing fire conditions that, whether they're started accidentally or intentionally, are just moving far faster and far more intensely than we've seen them in years. And again, I'm not a wildland expert by any means, but in talking to the folks that are, it sounds like this fire behavior is really unprecedented.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up, Nick, because I'm sitting there looking at my notes right next to me, and I was going to ask you the causes of these fires. And one thing I've been really thinking about a lot over the last 4 or 5 months is, we've gotten to the point in this country where you either have to be for the police or for the BLM. You got to be for this side or for that side. Like we've lost the ability to say some of this is probably forest and land management. Some of this is probably some climate change issues, and some of it is human behavior. So, for instance, the fire in Grand Junction in Colorado this summer, which I think burned 30,000 acres or something like that. That was a combination of all three. Clearly, without the trucker throwing the cigarette out, there's no fire. That's the human component. The global warming component is there hadn't been any rain up there in a long time, and that's not normal. And then you've got the management of the wilderness area. Sometimes maybe we don't manage as well as we could. The other thing, Nick, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, is fires in and of themselves in the wilderness area can be good. I mean, they're natural. It's natural to have fires out there. So it's not like these fires are all bad. I mean, you got to have some fires to clear out the junk and stuff. It's the problem with these uncontrolled fires, I think, that's the difference now, right?
Sure. And again, they're moving at a pace that I think is unprecedented and
Yeah.
an intensity. And I think, you know, we're as population increases across the West too, people want homes kind of out in the woods. I want one too, you know.
Yeah.
I wish I could afford one.
Yeah, yeah.
But you start running up against the problem of, okay, now we're in a place where fire is much more likely to burn.
Yeah.
You know, I talked about the city of Long Beach, where we don't have a whole lot of wildland urban interface. And so as a result, we don't get wildland fires because there's not a whole lot of wildland area. But when you're in an area that, if it hasn't burned in a few years, yeah, I mean, part of the natural cycle of forest replenishment is that occasionally they burn.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge and a task and a risk that I think maybe some folks don't recognize when they move to those areas that might be a little bit more susceptible to that. And then obviously the economic impact is massive, because you talk about the rescue of those people or the protection of their homes, and now you're talking about millions and sometimes billions of dollars worth of resources in order to do that when you scale it up.
Yeah, for sure. So how is it different? First of all, let me ask you this question. I was reading earlier this morning, and there's something now in California called a gigafire, which sounds like terrible. So what's a gigafire?
Man, that's a great question, Brian. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that I saw on the news. I guess it just means there's some massive, like they've combined, different fires have combined or something. But I'd never heard that phrase before.
A lot of the time we'll call that a complex, and maybe when two fires join up. So what's crazy about these fires is when they burn for long enough and intensely enough, they generate their own weather system, which then starts to perpetuate these cycles of fires that are coming through. But to put in perspective kind of what's going on, 5 of the largest, I believe, 15 historical fires on record in the state of California were still burning as of last week when I checked the CAL FIRE website.
Really?
5 of the greatest and most destructive fires of all time are actively burning in our lifetime in one fire season.